We come now to our last speakers of the session. Those are two young scholars, Katrīna TEIVÄNE-KORPA and Laine KRISTBERGA, and they approach photography as artworks and thank you, and enter into a discussion about the relationship between photography and performance and performation photography in Latvia. Both speakers are doctoral candidates at the Art Academy of Latvia and are experts on photography, especially Latvian photography. Mrs. TEIVÄNE-KORPA has written, moreover, the chapter on photography in the 5th volume of Art History of Latvia. So, please come.
Hello, my name is Laine, and this is Katrīna. We are very happy and excited to be here. And today we will present on our mutual joint research and study on performative manifestations in Latvian photography in the 1920s and 1930s. The relationship between photography and performance can be characterized as symbiotic, both aesthetically and conceptually. Even the pioneering practitioners at the birth of the photographic medium in the 19th century acknowledge photography's performative potential through the play of representations within the photographic medium. For example, Hippolyte Bayard's self-portrait as a drowned man in 1840, where he staged his own death and presented it in photography, is an early example of one-time performance destined only to exist as a photograph. Similarly, Fred Holland Day's The Seven Words in 1898 follow the dramatic pattern set by Bayard. To pass himself off as a convincing Jesus Christ, Day not only grew a bird, but starved himself for the crucial climatic scene. These photographic self-portraitures, implemented as photographic tableaux, were only destined to exist as photographs and not as separate, performative or theatrical events that, for example, could be viewed by audiences as well.
The photographic tableau is an important term in the discussion of performative manifestations in the photographs of 20s and 30s, since performance art and its accompanying terminology was not invented yet. Thus, we cannot speak of happenings or performances or use another kind of terminology from the mid-20th century. According to Michael Fried, the French word tableau has no exact equivalent in English. Picture comes closest, but it lacks the connotations of constructedness, of being the product of an intellectual act that the French word carries. As a matter of fact, of course, all images are to a certain degree constructed, and the element of staging is always part of the photographic act, as indicated by Roland Barthes. Indeed, it must be remembered that at the birth of photography, due to technical and chemical constraints, all photographic images were more or less staged. David Green also indicates that the theatrical aspect of staging and pre-visualization was an integral part of the entire photographic process. So, in fact, the performative process begins at the very planning stage without a photographic target or subject.
However, for the purposes of this presentation, and due to the time restrictions, we will not examine the issue of constructedness in depth. This is a challenging and philosophical question concerning the representation, authenticity, truth, and other aspects in the debates on photography. Therefore, at the moment we suggest that the constructed or staged elements in photography often imply that either the photographer or the subject, or both, actively participate in constructing or arranging the mise-en-scene, formal elements, mode of representation, etc. We propose that performance is an essential rather than peripheral element of photography, And in the course of our presentation, we will draw attention to the product of intellectual act, to quote Fried. It must be noted that surely not all photography falls under this umbrella. Our intention is to offer a methodological framework to interpret images with human subjects that were implemented as creative acts, including but not limited to the photographic studio environment. We are interested in the manifestations of performance and the techniques used to achieve the performative aesthetics. Often, these techniques are appropriated from other disciplines such as theatre staging, cinematography, sculpture, or painting. Therefore, it can be stated that performative photographs are rich palimpsests with a variety of intertextual references to other media, cultures, practices, or disciplines, thus truly demonstrating its potential as an art of appropriation.
For example, Latvian photographer Mārtiņš Sams claimed that staging or constructedness of a photograph must be invisible. According to Sams, such an effect can be achieved if the photographer spends enough time on the field studies, observations, etc. As a successful example of a simulated situation from his own oeuvre, Sams mentions his work Repose at Sea, where the preparation works took 1.5 summers to observe the fishermen's lives. Though constructed and theatrical, such images reveal life as it is, albeit through different conceptual apparatus. In this sense, photographs do belong to the discipline of visual arts and can be interpreted as any drawing or painting, to quote Susan Zondag.
Another example is Edvards Gaiķis' photograph, where he has organized the mise-en-scene, props, attributes, and the models in a way that it suggests a reference to the popular motif of Arcadia.
Also, the principle of photographic tableau was used for compositional studies for paintings, as it can be seen in the case of Jānis Rozentals.
Often, photographers work directly with performers, such as theatrical actors. In the 1920s and 30s, often scenes of popular plays were restaged, or actors impersonating popular characters from these plays posed for the camera to create publicity stills.
This kind of interdisciplinarity approach resonates with the genre of tableau vivant. Generally speaking, the tableau vivant was a popular form of entertainment among the aristocracy across Europe by the end of the 18th century. Participants would arrange themselves in the visualization of a well-known episode from history of literature or in imitation of a celebrated painting. If the early tableaux vivants were a parlor game, later they began to appear in theaters as well. Curtains would part to reveal performers arranged to resemble a painting, or perhaps more commonly posed as statues, taking on the appearance of marble with the help of chalked or powdered skin and light-colored draperies. It must be noted that other names for the use of living models to represent famous works of art were pose plastiques and living statuary.
The crucial aspect for our discussion is that the vocabulary and aesthetics of tableau vivant, the simulated image, the arrested movement, the freezing of the body into a living picture or statue, actually reverberate within the photographic practices and, above all, the performative manifestations in photography in the 1920s and 30s. In fact, it can be stated that tableau vivant is a meeting point of several modes of representation, constituting a palimpsest or textual overlay simultaneously evocative of painting, drama, and sculpture. Just as the pose plastique quoted, appropriated, and parodied sculpture, the tableau vivant was the equivalent interpretation of painting, in that it recreated the painting, producing the illusion that the three-dimensional living beings posed on stage are really a two-dimensional picture.
For example, the appropriation of sculpture is evident in the images of athletes captured by Robert Johansson. This particular work is from 1911, but such stylistics can be observed in his works of interwar period as well. Here, the athlete was often placed on a pedestal or platform, to some degree turning the salon into some kind of a stage, whereas the pose of the model often mimicked ancient Greek sculptures and the commonly accepted mode of the body representation. Also, athletes were often given props or attributes that could be associated with the ancient Greek or Roman culture, clothing, weapons, etc. This kind of approach resembles the practices usually associated with the way artists, painters, or sculptors worked in their studios. We can grasp also this feeling from the memories of Johansson's model, Matilda Ozoliņa, with whom the photographer worked around the same time, 1911. Johansson's took care of every detail, she writes. It was difficult to pose for him, yet he always tried to entertain me with conversations and made me hot tea because it was rather cold in the saloon. He treated every drapery, every detail of the pose as very crucial. We can also see this approach of pose plastique in KRISTBERGA's photograph Perseus with the head of Medusa, where a reference to a popular plot and character is included.
Whereas in these photographs from the lifestyle magazine Dial, which is Beauty in English, which was issued in the early 1930s, it is the awareness of the body and the aestheticization of body and its plastics that were manifested with the help of performative elements, such as the poses, choreography, costumes, etc. Often the photographic subjects or models were dancers who were capable to exhibit the art of pose plastique.
In magazine Dial, photographers collaborated not only with dancers but actors too. Often these photographs included references to other cultures and appropriated the relevant imagery and style. These performative photographs can also be seen as early instances of celebrity culture, where the image played a crucial role in contributing towards the fame and stardom of these actors or dancers, thus being part of self-branding strategy.
As regards the theoretical framework, a certain, yet not very strict categorization between the modes or concepts of performative photography can be proposed on the basis of the passive or active roles of the photographer and the photographic target or subject. The first category is the performative photography, where performance is produced photographically, including but not limited to photomontages and collages, or photographically manipulated and processed images. Here, the active photographer is positioned versus passive subject. Within this category, the photographer acts similarly to a film director, choreographing and orchestrating the mise-en-scene and photographic subject before the camera with a certain vision on his or her mind. In this case, the element of constructedness, since often these are photomontages and collages, is very obvious. The photographer is an active creator, and the resulting photograph is often treated as a fine art object on its own.
Photographer Vilis Rīdznieks defined it as an artistically deformed fact and expressiveness juxtaposed to life as it is. The model in this scenario can be active insofar as he/she implements the ideas of the photographer, or at least is contributing towards this goal. Yet the key author of this kind of performative photography is the photographer. Interestingly enough, this particular photograph has been taken by an amateur photographer.
The second category is the performative photography, where performance is produced by the subject through the act of self-representation before the camera. Here, there is the passive photographer versus active subject. Within this category, the photographer acts as a documentarist, photographing the subject who is the active participant, and contrary to the scenario mentioned previously, is the key author of the photograph. Even if the outcome is not very strategically planned and envisioned, with the final result achieved through a series of takes or photo sessions, it is still the subject who determines the visuality and often the performative aesthetics of the particular wall. In this category, performance through the act of self-representation is staged merely for the camera, as for example in KRISTBERGA's case, who can be characterized as an eccentric flaneur and dandy of his time, and who often put himself before the camera in various disguises. Indeed, Paddock deliberately created and constructed a distinctly unusual look and lived his public life as though he were a character in a play. Similarly, his attitude towards the carnivalesque element as an integral part of his everyday life that he was so keen to exhibit can be discussed as the everyday performance, where the boundaries between art and life, as well as the real and fictional identities, were very fluid.
The fact that many of these performative manifestations and continuous attempts to reinvent himself were documented in photography cannot be underestimated today. Around 1930, Paddock was invited to work as a window decorator at the photo salon of KRISTBERGA. Here, in the duration of 10 years, Paddock created striking window decorations, attracting the attention of the potential customers. However, the work environment and the fact that he was surrounded by photographers like Henriks Bauers, Jānis Ozols, Kārlis Bauls, and the photographic equipment also encouraged Paddock to pose and perform for the camera. According to Jānis Kalniņš, our previous speaker, Paddock loved being photographed, and the numerous photo portraits are a testimony to a well-staged play, acting or appropriating roles that otherwise would not be possible to act out. Kalniņš also emphasizes that, without doubt, posing for the camera and embodiment of different characters allowed Paddock to forget about the poverty and to experiment with various impersonations, the Spanish caballero, gangster, dandy, Dracula, etc.
Often the boundaries between these two previously mentioned forms of performative photography cannot be strictly drawn. There can be hybrid collaborative projects where the photographer and the subject are both active and contributing towards the meaning and aesthetics of the resulting photograph. Interestingly enough, in 1985, Latvian photography theoretician Sergejs Daugavičs implies such collaborative projects referring to photo actors. Quote, "The models in photography usually play a passive role, yet they can also engage in joint collaboration with the photographer. The photographer, operating with the elements of mise-en-scene and applying the methods of a director, becomes a partner to the model and captures the joint creative act."
This kind of conceptual framework is also evident in the studio photography in the early 20th century and the interwar period as well. For example, these two photographs are an example of cross-dressing involving a play with gender representation. It can be questioned if this is a cliché or subversion of the usual photographic representation of a married couple, since frequently it was the husband who was sitting. Also, we can discuss it in the context of the fin de siècle phenomenon of the new woman, who was free-spirited, independent, educated, and usually not interested in marriage.
Also, the photographic studio was often arranged as a stage with the respective props and attributes. Since the salon photography was the etalon of self-representation, this was also an opportunity for the subjects to act as models and present themselves in a better or more interesting light. Such photographs often involve performative elements.
Other cases included anthropological studies, in this case Robert Johansson's photographs of a gypsy girl in 3 different visualizations.
During research, our attention was caught by this very intriguing case, namely 2 photographs of one and the same man, Robert Salmiņš, taken in a studio and while working in the field. In the studio photograph, we see a young, confident man dressed like a gentleman. It seems that he feels natural in this situation, whereas in the photograph of his everyday environment, it seems that he is playing a role and acts as if he was a peasant. It is also signaled by the very eccentric and odd composition of the photograph, which was not common for that period. Therefore, these 2 photographs, with their striking juxtaposition, can be conceptualized as an example of everyday performance, where it is the social role that is performed.
Moreover, we came across another pair of visually striking and truly fascinating photographs. where the performance of roles was taken even further, suggesting opportunities for future research of queer aesthetics and its history in Latvian photography. And with this open ending, we would like to thank you for your attention.